You are listening to the Business Leadership Podcast with Edwin Frondoso.
So many people feel stressed about their finances, and that impacts people's lives in such a material way, right? It impacts relationships, it impacts families. Um, and so I think if sort of everyone's life was on the way to being financially optimized, for a lot of Canadians, home ownership is one of those ultimate life goals that you need to have good credit and have your finances in order. And so our vision really is to live in a world where people feel confident about money and where Borrowell's playing a role in providing the insights and tools to help people make smart money decisions.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Biz Leader. Welcome to another episode of the Business Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Edwin Frondoso, and today we are featuring a special episode from our future narrated mini-series recorded live at the Collision Conference in Toronto, Canada. In this mini-series, we explore the future of leadership, innovation, and storytelling with visionary leaders who are not just designing products, but are creating entire new worlds and markets. Joining me today is Dr. Paul Newton, and together we'll be speaking with Eva Wong. She is the co-founder and COO of Borrowell, a fintech company dedicated to helping Canadians make great decisions about credit. In our conversation, Eva will discuss Borrowell's offering, including credit scores, credit building tools, and their impactful Rent Advantage program, which allows tenants to report rent payments to credit bureaus. We'll also explore Borrowell's proactive approach to financial management, the benefits of financial literacy, and the importance of transparent financial services. So without further ado, here we go. We're now speaking with Eva Wong, co-founder and COO of Borrowell. Eva, nice to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Edwin.
No, it's great. It's great to connect with you again. I know we've connected in the past, but I'm just going to jump right in, Eva. Can you share what problem that Borrowell is solving, I guess, within the fintech or the personal credit and financial space?
Yeah, I think there are two major problems. There's like a real asymmetry of information when it comes to personal finance, I think, where banks and lenders have like a lot of information and typically consumers don't necessarily. And I think that there's also just a lot of friction. It's really hard to do a lot of things. It involves a lot of paperwork, sometimes trips in person to the bank. And so I think those two things add up to make personal finance really confusing. And for a lot of people, actually super, super stressful. And so our vision really is to live in a world where people feel confident about money and where Borrowell's playing a role in providing the insights and tools to help people make smart money decisions.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a huge asking. I guess personally for me and I guess my money mindset journey, I remember not even well, first off, no one ever taught me money. My parents didn't teach me anything about
I
money.
think
You know,
that's very normal. I think that's super normal is that like in a lot of families, it's a taboo subject. With friends, you don't really necessarily talk about money. And because people don't talk about it, there often can be like gap of knowledge, but also sometimes like feelings of shame where you're like, ugh, I know I'm supposed to be like saving towards retirement, or I know I'm probably not supposed to carry a balance on my credit card. But a lot of people do that. And I think that shame and that not talking about it often makes the problem worse.
yeah, I think it especially I mean like I'm just talking personally on myself. It's not even worse in that shame and it's like no one because no one taught us and I have a point to this, Eva, because no one taught me. You just make assumptions and maybe they're all from the wrong place, which might be TV. And I guess for yourselves and what Borwell is doing and when you say it's more I guess there's a couple of things in really educating and building this tool. So it's like, where does Borrowell come into that journey of, I guess, understanding that financial journey? Is it like, what are the questions am I asking? And this is benefits to myself and those who are listening. Is like, what are the key questions people are asking? And they're like, oh, you know what? That's what Borrowell answers. Like where's that
Yeah.
part? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it quite varied. We have over 3 million Canadians who are members today. Their needs vary from person to person.
hmm
I can share some of the major ones. I think for a lot of people, they come to Borrowell to get their credit score. And sometimes it's just because they're curious. or maybe they're renting it and their landlord asking for a credit score and credit report. There's a lot of newcomers as well who are like, I've heard there's this thing called the credit score and it's really important,
Yeah.
but I know nothing about it. So for a lot of people, they come to us for information and education around credit.
hmm
And then increasingly, we're building tools for people to build their credit. We have a credit builder product that enables people to prove their credit worthiness. We're helping tenants report their rent to credit bureaus. That's a relatively new product in Canada that we pioneered. So tenants, without needing their landlord's involvement, can report their rent to credit bureaus. And the reason that we started this is that we took a look at our data and we found that people who have a mortgage have, on average, credit scores that are over 100 points higher than someone who doesn't have a mortgage. While some of that could be selection bias because you probably need to have decent credit to get a mortgage, we do think that a lot of it is it's a really big payment, and maybe you're paying, $2,000 in rent and your neighbor is paying $2,000 in a mortgage. That mortgage payment is being reported to the credit bureau, and that builds their credit history and that helps them improve their credit score. Meanwhile, you're paying $2,000 in rent and that doesn't count for anything. That's something that we've pioneered that we're really proud of as well.
That's actually interesting to me. I mean, in the sense that, so if you are paying rent right now, basically for those who are listening, we go on to Borrowell, and is it as simple as that, that it gets reported back to? Um,
Yeah, so we have a product called Rent Advantage that people can sign up for.
mhm.
And we could sort of like get proof of your rent payment in different ways. You can connect to your bank account or you can, upload bank statements. And we've just recently actually launched an add-on where you can go back 2 years and actually report 2 years of past rent payments. And so I think that's really great because with personal finances, so often there's like, ugh, I wish I had started earlier, right? Or it's like, I
Huge.
know that I should have, been doing this earlier. And this is an opportunity to sort of like make that up. It's like, okay, maybe you wanted to report rent, but it wasn't available. Now you can actually go back 2 years and report 2 years worth of rent payments, which we feel like pretty confident will make an impact on someone's credit and credit score. So we're actually offering like a money back guarantee on that product where it's like, if it doesn't actually improve your credit, then we'll just give you your money back because we think it should.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I really appreciate that, that shows a lot of leadership in terms of, I guess, really tapping into those who are using Borrell and what really their needs are. Because without that credit score, it really, I guess, for those who are not as financial literate, it's really a disadvantage for them purchasing something in the future, whether it's a car or or a mortgage or
Yeah.
one. And if they have a lack of I guess, a credit score, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so I've chatted about like, two aspects of what we do, which is understand credit and build credit. The third is what you're talking about right now, which is how do you use your credit? For a lot of people, it's not just a theoretical exercise so that like they want to get a car loan, they need to have good credit. Otherwise, they're going to be paying really high interest rates. For people who have good credit, they want to make sure they're getting rewarded for that. So the other thing we do is help people understand what financial products they qualify for. We have lots of integrations with our financial partners, so we can sometimes say you're pre-qualified. If we don't do that, we'll let you know based on our data, everyone's likelihood of being approved for every product before they apply. We're also negotiating lots of special offers because of this large member base that we have now. We want Borrowell to always be that place where if you get a credit card through us, you should feel confident you're getting the best sign up offer out there. Helping people use their credit is increasingly a big part of the value proposition and why people come to Borrowell.
Yeah, and I'm sure your partners really appreciate that trust you've built with your
Yeah.
community and your users because they've been there understanding their credit and then building it and going on that journey. So that's an
Yeah.
amazing part, which answers my question before is like, where do people like really, what are the questions they're asking? And a lot of the questions could be, as you said, just understanding my credit. Why am I trying to understand my credit? Because I want to build some assets or things or do things with my
Yeah.
life, right? So
Yeah.
that's
A lot
really,
of it is life goals, right? It's like, it's even beyond financial products. It's that I want to have a home for my family that's stable, that I own. Like for a lot of Canadians, home ownership is one of those ultimate life goals that you need to have good credit and have your finances in order to achieve. Yeah, a lot of it I think is actually more life goals than just financial products.
Eva, thinking about the fintech industry, What have you seen that's really helping personal finance or personal credit management? Have you seen from your position the personal finance health within Canada increasing because of different type of services and tool sets that like Borwell and maybe some other colleagues have out there?
Yeah, yeah, I think for sure. Like I describe two of the big problems with personal finance to be that asymmetry of information where it's very one-sided and also a lot of friction. I think there's a ton of fintech companies that are trying to make things more transparent and also trying to make processes a lot easier. So I think there's lots of great examples of that. It's like way easier now. You can open a bank account with a neobank. You can open an investment account without having to go into a bank branch. I think just the ease with which we can do things like send money abroad or exchange like foreign currency is way easier. So, yeah, I think there's a ton that's happening that makes things easier for consumers, cheaper for consumers, and puts a lot more control back into their hand.
It's really great to see like those innovations where it's making the barrier of access to investments into all these personal tools and stuff. I guess what's really in the back of my mind, Eva, is it still sort of that maybe the problems that I had learning about money is that still happening today for the younger generations, or are they learning now, or because we're educating the younger generations?
I do think that, well, first of all, there is now more financial literacy in schools.
Mm,
I don't know what the outcomes of that are. I think it's a good first step, but I don't know about you. I think there's like a lot of things that they teach in schools that maybe we didn't learn. I think one of the real positive things is there's a lot of information now, even on social media like TikTok. And I'm sure it's not all like 100% accurate, but I think it's helpful that people are at least having the conversation. And
right.
it's become much more mainstream and it's, demystifying things. So maybe, like when you and I were growing up, there really wasn't social media. And so if you didn't have a conversation with a real life person, there wasn't really a way that you could get that information unless you were taking a book out of the library or something like that. So now at least I feel like it's more in the mainstream where people are talking about their own personal journey, tackling debt or achieving some sort of financial goal. And so I think that's really positive that at least the conversation is coming out from behind closed doors.
Yeah, and like you said before, a word was taboo on our side is no one talked about it. And it's I guess it's
Yeah.
a fresher breath there where people are discussing it. And just from that discussion, whether you are active in the discussion, it leads you to wanting to learn more and
Yeah.
go down those routes.
Yeah. And I think it's in a more accessible way, right? It's not as maybe daunting as having to like figure out what book to read and reading like through this huge academic piece of literature, but I think it's much more accessible. And I do think there are some positive signs, at least on things like monitoring credit, that the percentage of Canadians who are monitoring their credit has increased a huge amount in the last 10 years from basically like no one did it 10 years ago to now I think it's like 30 to 40% of Canadians get their credit score in some way, shape, or form. And there's also been research that shows if you're monitoring your credit, you're more likely to have better credit as you're like keeping an eye on it.
That's interesting. So is there any industry goals where maybe from yourself or where you're sitting or maybe Borwell where you know what we'd feel it's a success if 50% of Canadians are checking their credit. Like is that something that's discussed internally?
Yeah, I think if we look at other markets that are more advanced in terms of credit monitoring than in Canada, like if you look at the US, through one company, almost 50% of Americans are monitoring their credit. So that for us as a personal goal is we want 50% of Canadians to be monitoring their credit through Borrowell,
Mhm.
not through, anywhere, but through
Sure.
us.
I love
Yeah.
that. We talked about we were in collision and we were doing a lot of interviews when it came to the future and urban AI came up a lot. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, Eva, when it comes to fintech or maybe Borrowell, is there any new or major disruptions that are happening within the industry?
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone's talking about Gen AI. And for us so far, we've been using Gen AI a lot internally as a productivity tool to
Mhm.
enhance our own productivity. So to provide better customer service or to develop code or test code more quickly. We're using it in sort of quality assurance on our member experience side as well, just to look into our responses to make sure like the quality is high. And so there's lots of internal tooling that we're using. And then we're experimenting a lot with the external side of Gen AI as well. But we just want to be fully confident that it's going to make sense for our members and that it doesn't cause sort of like more confusion. So for us, again, we're continually testing and we're excited about where things are going to go in the next little bit.
That's great. When it comes to like future narratives, I'm curious, what does a future of financial empowerment for everyday citizens look like in your point of view?
Yeah, I think there's a few components to it. One is I think that like consumers should have a lot of choice, whereas today I feel like they either feel like they don't, or maybe because they don't have the credit for it, or it's like, oh, I don't know where to go, so I just go to my bank. But I feel like the more choice there is and the more competition there is out there, the better it is for consumers. And I think with fintech companies and banks having to be more competitive, there will be more choice and more products. Uh, I think it'd be great if things are done more for people or there's like a more proactive element to it. So that's something that we think a lot about at Borrowell. We don't want people to have to remember that in 6 months their mortgage is renewing and you have to like, oh, I'm like behind. I need to like figure this out.
Hmm.
We want to be that place where it's like we're proactive and sort of alerting you to things that are coming up in your life. Oh, your car insurance is coming up for renewal. Do you want us to shop that for you so that we can find you the best rate? We're monitoring your credit. We're monitoring, hopefully in the future with open banking, your cash flow, so we can say, hey, like this is what we're noticing. Do you want to take this action? And making it much more proactive on our part as opposed to reactive.
Yeah, I guess proactive when it comes to empowerment and just speaking in the lens with credit scores. And this, I was just thinking about this right now. It just came to mind for those renters. If the renters and their credit score was going up, it could something proactive is just an idea. And I'm sure you guys thought of that about this was something like, hey, your credit score keeps going up because you entered the renting score. And there may be a point where like, hey, you might be able to get into a mortgage if this is something that you're thinking
Yeah.
about or feeling or
Yeah.
aspiring
100%.
to, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right, and I think sometimes there's this, tentativeness where it's like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm ready for it," but maybe we can say, "Hey, other people who are making your income with your spending profile, with your credit profile, they are buying their first home in the next 12 months. Do you want us to help you along that journey? What does that look like? How much of a down payment might you need?" For sure, there's lots of different journeys that we could go on with our members. Another great use case if your score is improving is a lot of times that means you can refinance existing debt that you have. Maybe
Mm.
you have credit card and you haven't paid off the balance. You can qualify for a personal loan at a much lower interest rate than carrying a balance on your credit card. So that's the kind of thing we'd want to be really proactive about is say, hey, do you know what? We noticed you've got like a $10,000 balance on your credit card. You're paying 22% interest on that, which is a lot. You're pre-qualified for a $10,000 personal loan with this partner and it's an 8% interest rate or whatever it is. And that helps you save X dollars of interest, helps you get out of debt this many months faster. And yeah, just being really proactive around presenting potential solutions to our members without them having to go out and doing the research on it.
Yeah, from my point of view, it seems to me that people may not be doing that research again
Yeah.
because of their uneasiness around their financial status and having that proactive giving me like, hey, as a trusted email from Borrowell, it's like, oh, I didn't know this. I got to look into this. Of course, it's up to me. It's my prerogative to go into it now, but at least this is something I never thought of, or I should be putting higher on my priority because it does save you X amount percent each day. It's almost like going
Yeah.
that extra mile. Say, oh, by the way, whether you have that insight or not, or how much they owe, it's like you could save up to X
Yeah,
amount per
for
month.
sure. For sure. And our goal is to make it super easy so it doesn't have to be like a ton of work on your side, right? It's like you log in, we present this option to you. Hopefully you just click a couple buttons to be like, yes, that's right. Yes, I do want to like apply for this. Okay, that's great. And ideally in the future, it's even like, okay, let's take that money and pay off your credit card for you, right? It's like our vision of it is that you just sort of click along that, yeah, I want to do this. Yeah, that makes sense. And it isn't something that you have to go and research because that's honestly like it's not going to happen, right? We live busy lives. We've all got these like long checklists of things that we're supposed to do that we don't get to because life gets in the way.
That's great. And that's definitely a time saver for sure, which optimizes people's lives. As we're thinking about future narratives and something that we're getting passionate about when it comes to business leaders who are out there and speaking and building and inspiring, I'm curious, Eva, if you could share the vision of the future that you're building today.
I feel like I've talked about it a little bit, which is this world where We give people lots of choice. We're offering proactive insights, and we make it really easy for people to action those. And our vision is for people to feel confident about money because we're providing the insights and tools to help them make smart money decisions. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's that like everyone's actually optimized on a continual basis because we're proactively providing insights and actionable things for them to do if it makes sense.
that's great. I guess where I want to get challenge you more, Eva, is when Borrowell or your vision of getting people to that. What does the world look like when everyone has this and everything's proactive, they're not stressed, and they're able to do this? Like, what does that world look like?
It's probably like a bit of a ways off for everyone to be there, but I think today so many people feel stressed about their finances, and that impacts people's lives in such a material way, right? It impacts relationships, it impacts families, um, and so, yeah, I think if sort of everyone's life was on the way to being financially optimized, I think that people would feel a lot more confident, relationships would be better, um, I do think the world would be a better place if everyone was always, like, making good money decisions because they're enabled to. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of the vision.
I appreciate it. And as we talk about it, even obviously, this is just you and I having a discussion. It's like if I could think of the people that are close to me and don't have the money worries, maybe they're, this is just to share. This is not your vision, but it could be. But this, they're living their best lives, living their passions and doing things, being fit. And like you said, in the good relationships. And I guess
Yeah,
overall, that's an amazing vision, right? Because
yeah.
as you said, finances, money is not the root of all evil, but it's the root of a lot of stress. I guess that's pretty good on my end. I'd love it if you could share, Eva, for those who are listening, any final thoughts, recommendations, or any advice for those, whether they're co-founders, business leaders, or executives who are listening in today. And it could be the first thing that comes to mind. It could be around leadership, it could be founding, it could be finance, whatever first comes to
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think for other founders and entrepreneurs, I want to acknowledge how hard it is. On podcasts like this, I can make it sound easy and fun, but it is a hard journey. And 99% of the time, no one like you is interested in what's happening. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is that if you're finding it hard, that's 100% normal. Another piece of advice would be every so often to focus on the difference that you are making. I think a
Mhm.
lot of entrepreneurs and founders are very focused on problems. They're worried about their future. And we don't necessarily take the time to look back and think about the success that we've had already and the impact that we've had already. I think that's important both personally, but also for the team. So this is something that we try to do at Borrowell every 3 months or so. We invite one of our members to our weekly all hands meeting, and we just interview them and we learn about them and their life story and how Borrowell has had an impact on their lives, and it's just a great reminder. We're all basically just, like, typing things into a computer most of the day, but it's helpful to know that it's actually having an impact on people's lives, and so that would be my piece of advice. Pause, take the time to reflect and pat yourself on the back a little bit.
I love that, Eva. Well, I do appreciate you. I'm rooting for you to get to 50% credit. However, I could help on my end, you definitely let us know. But thank you for joining us on the Business Leadership Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's it, Biz Leader. Thank you for joining me on this special episode of the Business Leadership Podcast, part of the Future Narrator miniseries recorded at the Collision Conference. This was a very enlightening conversation with Eva, exploring how Borrowell is addressing critical issues in the fintech and personal finance space. For links to all the resources we discussed, to connect with Eva, and to learn more about this Future Narrator project, please slide into the show notes in the app that you're listening to right now. And if you're interested in reading more about Eva and the other business leaders that we profiled at Collision, please do join the waitlist for our upcoming book. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it to the first person who comes to mind that could benefit from hearing about Borrowell and would be absolutely grateful from hearing from you. Your support helps us grow and empowers us to create more great content for you. Thanks again for tuning in and being a part of this business leadership community. Until next time, have a 100x day.